So we are expecting a third participant to join us here in a minute. And Jeff Pesler is with Woolpert, and not surprisingly, I suppose there is some technical difficulties today. So while we're waiting for Jeff, Rick, maybe we'll start off with just you giving a bit of an introduction for yourself and your organization, and tell us about what you guys are up to.
Sure. So my name is Rick Niederstadt. I'm the Capital Program Support Manager for the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. We are a regional governmental sponsored entity. We do a lot of work in wastewater reclamation, conveyance, flood management. We also do quite a bit of work in the green infrastructure realm. So our capital program is on the order of $100 million a year. And we obviously use eBuilder to manage that capital program. So if you were listening to any of the sessions earlier this morning, you heard a little bit about what we're doing, trying to access funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And from an overall program perspective, right, any of those segments of our program might have some funding applicability. And all of those segments of our program have quite a large number of projects that might be going on at any given time.
Okay. And how long have you been in MMSD?
So I've been at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District for 22 years. 18 as a direct employee. I was a consultant doing construction management in the field for the sewerage district for about 4 years before I became a direct employee. So started out in the field and as a construction manager, and moved into the office in 2012. And then I've had a couple of different roles in the office. Current role obviously is the capital improvement program support manager. So lots going on and lots to do. Yeah,
very good. And you've been using eBuilder for a number of years now, 6 or 7, is that right? Or
yeah, we started using eBuilder in 2016. We did a multi-phased implementation. So we displaced a couple of other systems along with a homegrown black box that mashed data together from a few other systems. We did a multi-phased implementation, displacing our construction management functionality first, and then our project management functionality second.
Okay. And just one more piece of color on that. I think one of the big things with you guys around eBuilder and your utilization there was adding in some resource management functionality eBuilder. And so there was a different type of approach than kind of our normal standard out of the box implementation with eBuilder. Want to share any about that background or experience? Or
Sure. Prior to eBuilder, we were a P6 user, and we used P6 for resource loaded schedules. We're a little bit odd in that we capitalize the cost of our own internal labor. Depending on how much we spend in any given year, that can range from 15 to 20% of our capital program. And being able to manage that as from a cost perspective, as well as being able to manage that from a resource planning perspective is critically important. Right, it's really hard to deliver a project on schedule if you don't have the internal resources to work on it. So we leverage eBuilder's resource enhanced schedule module to plan for our own internal labor resources across our entire program, whether projects in planning, design, construction, post-construction, so on and so forth. We can look, months or years out into the future and see what people have on their plate from a project perspective, what sort of effort is involved in the projects that are on their plate, so on and so forth. It's very helpful. We couldn't manage our program anywhere near as effectively as we do now without it.
Okay, very good. I thought that would be an interesting aside real quick. Hi, Jeff. It shows you're muted right now. There you go. I know it's technical issues today, so thanks for making it work, and welcome on. So we just did Rick's intro real quick. You want to take a few minutes with an introduction of yourself and what you guys are working on here lately?
Sure. So my name is Jeff Pesler. I'm a program director with Woolpert in our technology services practice. So Woolpert is a small, large, mid-size engineering, architecture, geospatial firm. We're headquartered in Dayton. We're now nearing, I think 30 plus offices worldwide. And our practice group's niche is centered around providing technology solutions for asset management and permitting related needs for local government with a kind of a unique domain expertise around wet utilities, stormwater, and sewer. So my role as a program director is I've gotten to work with a lot of regional utilities, municipal organizations, county governments over the last 20 years and advise them on their asset management journeys, so to speak.
Okay. So that's you guys work with CityWorks extensively in the asset management space, and been doing that for a while, and seen a lot of success with that. And that's part of where our relationship came from with you guys. When Trimble first did the CityWorks acquisition, one of the things we understood was they had a partner program, a lot like eBuilder's partner program, and that Woolpert was one of the key partners that they worked with. And so since then, we've had a good relationship with you guys and done a couple of projects together, and including a big DOT project a couple of years ago. So good to have you on board here today, and great to have your partnership with Trimble. We appreciate you guys being part of our ecosystem. And one more thing on this subject, and that is, as we look at Trimble and the recent reorganization that we've had, just a rearrangement of kind of the different business units within Trimble. One of those impacted our division. We were formerly what we called Trimble PPM, Program and Project Management. It was eBuilder for owners and our other solution project site for contractors. And this reorganization is now called the Owner and Public Sector, so OPS for short, but the Owner Public Sector division, which includes eBuilder for capital program and project management, CityWorks for asset and facilities management that is really based on the Esri platform, and then Agile Assets, which is focused around pavement and roads and bridges and those types of assets for maintenance and management. So all owner focused, all public sector, or not all public sector, but largely public sector focused. And so anyway, that's a good segue there into our next segment of the discussion, which is the core of it, around infrastructure. So Rick, you guys at MMSD have been involved over the years with a lot of different funding mechanisms to support your projects. IIJA is another one of those opportunities. And are you guys going to be taking advantage of that? I know you spoke to this earlier in one of the other segments, but can you talk about what you guys are be doing related to IIJA and funding and the different opportunities you're pursuing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned this morning, I'm not sure if everybody on here listened to that, but virtually all of the funding we may get through that program will be through the state revolving fund, which is passed through the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We've participated in that program for years. We have projects every year that are funded using clean water fund loans, which basically provides a considerable rate reduction from market on interest rates for loans. A big component of the program moving forward, as it relates to the current infrastructure law, is there's a significant principal forgiveness component to that, which we are still awaiting to hear what sort of projects that might be applied to, so on and so forth. I was just looking at some of the background information on the bill and some of the funding that's been made available. State of Wisconsin, I think the entire state, the Clean Water Fund Loan Program, I think receives $48 million for the whole state for 2022. Presumably, we will obviously get some of that, and clearly not all of it. And I think, as I mentioned earlier this morning, we have a call here in a couple of weeks with a lot of the other large wastewater utilities in the state, so Green Bay, Madison, things like that, with the DNR, to really start to talk about those details. What does it mean for our organizations? How might some of that funding come down to us? What the requirements might be, so on and so forth. So still a fair amount of uncertainty out there, but definitely expecting to get some more information and some more details here in the coming weeks, for funding that will be coming through yet this year.
Okay. So Jeff, a lot of things that are a lot of you guys' clients, a lot of Woolpert's clients are local government agencies, and we've seen you guys in dozens of those types of organizations where we coordinated our efforts before. What are some of the big themes that if I'm a local government agency, city, county, local water, wastewater district, what do I need to be thinking about when it comes to IIJA, how to best go about getting funding, and what are some of the things maybe that Woolpert can help with regard to those types of pursuits?
So to get the ball rolling, it really helps to understand where IIJA funding is going to be flowing through. The vast majority of program funding coming from the federal government through this infrastructure investment bill is going to be funneled through existing programs at the state level. Rick already mentioned, the state revolving loan funds. Those are sources that are going to be programmatic sources that are going to be available at the state level for any of the water or sewer infrastructure related projects. And we've got some pretty good guidance around those because we know what projects kind of fit within those categories of the clean water state revolving loan fund and the drinking water state revolving loan fund. So when we advise clients today, we typically advise them to make sure that you've got a prioritized list of projects that you want to take on, have the justification, make sure that you're, for IIJA in particular, there's some guidance around, prioritizing maintenance and repair, over, big expansions, trying to stay away from sprawl and focus on making sure that existing infrastructure is maintained to the highest degree possible. And, not making it, you really have a future outlook planned out, well thought, and that will definitely help through the application processes. And, here in Ohio, understanding how that funding is going to flow out, what the timelines are. If you wanted to be a 2022 funded project, the guidance is you got to have your applications in by the end of January of the funding year. So it's knowing some things like that and just understanding how things are going to align as funding rolls out.
Okay. Is this something Woolpert is helping some of your clients to arrange and manage and build out their plans? Is that a service Woolpert offers?
It absolutely is. We're working with county wastewater utility currently on developing programs around I&I, water loss, and lead detection, so that they can go after these funding sources. So it's very much we help develop the programs, develop the documentation and the planning that needs to go in, needs to be done ahead of the application process. And that way we can optimally pair the program with the funding source, so that we're looking for as much alignment as possible between what you're looking to achieve with the program and what the funding sources intended for.
Okay. So Rick, we were talking about this and getting prepared for it. One of the interesting things I thought that you mentioned, you hear little snippets about this in the news as you're reading these articles, but you don't really understand the ramifications of it. But it's the Buy American components of this, and how the real purpose of IIJA is to continue to build the American economy, right? And if we're going to do that, then we should probably try to buy things in America instead of somewhere outside of, right? So tell us a little bit more, or give us some more detail about the expectations in IIJA for how that's going to impact you guys.
Sure. So, obviously, federal funding isn't a stranger to our organization. I'm sure it's not a stranger to many of the organizations that are listening in here. And historically, what comes with some of that federal funding, or what has in the past, is the American iron and steel requirements. And I think most contractors and vendors are pretty well up to snuff on dealing with those requirements. But when it comes to the current legislation, the Build American, Buy American component really builds on American iron and steel, and it goes quite a bit further. So there's a lot of requirements in there for not just American iron and steel, but American manufactured products, American manufactured materials. Looking through the details, it's being able to prove that for a project funded by these sources, right, you have to be able to prove that north of 50% of a manufactured equipment's componentry are from the United States, right? So we've done a little bit of reaching out to our vendors, our contracting community, just to check in with them to see are they aware of what these requirements are. Are they going to have challenges getting documentation about compliance with some of those requirements? And I think across the board, the answer to that was yes, right? The contracting community, at least with the types of contractors we work with, aren't yet up to snuff on what those requirements are, and they're very uncertain as to what sort of success they might have with getting documentation to support compliance with those requirements. So it's definitely a part of the program that we have to be careful of. We're certainly trying to plan ahead to make sure that, one, we understand the requirements, two, that we put those requirements into our contract documents where applicable, and then three, have the capacity to evaluate compliance with those requirements, because clearly, much like we've had to do in the past in demonstrating compliance with American iron and steel, we're going to have to demonstrate compliance with Build American, Buy American as well.
Okay. And that's kind of a granular detail around, something that if you're not really on top of and tracking and managing, it can sneak up on you and be a real issue. What about if we back this up to the bigger picture, and we think about MMSD, and we think about, you've got $100 million capital program annually. There's some of this that's some of these loans that may have principal forgiveness. How are you going to build out your actual capital plan and identify the projects that might be able to get this type of funding from your DNR and be able to support that? How are you going about building out the big picture?
Well, so another good question. I think our capital program is rather well developed, right? We have lots of projects in our plan, going well into the future. And clearly we add new projects as needs arise. But, from that perspective, we're not entirely sure, what those requirements might be. But that said, we are proactive in the efforts of making sure we have enough data about our program and the projects within our program that when we hear about what those requirements are, we can very quickly translate into which projects comply with those requirements, right? So, take just, for example, something like an underserved or disadvantaged community, right? Which is maybe identified by zip code, right? Well, we can very quickly identify which of our projects are fully located within those zip codes, right? If we didn't have that kind of data and we get that requirement of, we're going to fund projects in these zip codes, well, now we have to go and, build up the information to help identify what projects those are. We've already done most of that legwork. We have our system built out, to the point where we can simply go into our GIS system, for example, because we have project polygons for our projects with data that is interfaced from eBuilder, and we could say, all right, show me all the projects that are in in these zip codes, things like that. So it's really clearly we didn't give thought to that particular use case when we did an integration between our GIS system and eBuilder. but it's clearly an advantage of having that integration where, whatever the requirement might be, it's more than likely we are going to be able to leverage the data that we have in our system to help us identify projects that meet those requirements.
Yeah, that's really a key component in it. It's one thing to have all that data. It's another thing to be able to use it and tie it together. You never anticipate that type of application coming around, 3 or 5 or 7 years later after you've designed it. But it's good to have it when you do. So Jeff, what are some of the other things that Woolpert is looking at when you consider the funding aspects of this, all of these particular details around the location where projects are going to be coming from, the type of materials that are being used? What else do organizations, local organizations, really need to be thinking about and planning for to be ready for IIJ?
Well, from just strictly an understanding your system perspective, Rick nailed a lot of it. I think it's understanding what you have, where it's located, and what kind of condition it's in, right? That's how you're going to come up with the projects that are going to be eligible. So in support of that, and this is one of the interesting things about these funding sources as well, is the guidance indicates, this goes back to ARPA as well, not just IIJA, but technology and hardware, software are eligible for funding as well. So you can look at these projects very comprehensively. And if you're looking for enhancing a system or maybe replacing a system for managing your assets, for doing work management, for permitting, for project planning, those are all eligible uses. So building that into a comprehensive project that can be presented for funding is definitely the way we're advising our clients to be thinking about these things.
Certainly. Yeah, that's one of the things I think that, if you have an effective program, if you have an effective solutions in place and tools in place to be able to manage all this data and be able to do the analysis, right? There's so many times that we here at eBuilder look at our business, and if we've got the right data and we can analyze it, we can come up with a good plan for where we're going and what we're doing. But without that, it's a real challenge, right?
Yeah,
So,
certainly. And one thing to add too is not, if you're looking at doing any sort of investment in tech, it makes sense to also be looking at evaluating your workflows and your business processes. Those are something that kind of get often overlooked when you're making a technology investment, or making an infrastructure investment. But there's no better time to look at how you're performing than when you're making that kind of investment.
Okay. Agreed with that for sure. So one thing I'll say to our session participants here, if you'd like to submit a question, the Q&A session is open for this, and the team here will be happy to take questions if you guys have them. And looking into our Q&A queue, there is nothing queued up right now as far as questions are concerned. So we'll be happy to have those. So you guys with Rick with DNR, you guys are going to be seeking those funds. You're having the calls with other peer agencies and organizations around the state, cities, counties, water, wastewater districts, et cetera. What's the process going to look like there? Is it going to be a grant application process? Is this going to be more of a who has the political power in the state of Wisconsin to be able to pull in the most funds, or you guys have the best state representative who's going to fight for this, or what's it look like as far as the process is concerned? And don't feel like you have to incriminate anyone or yourself by giving the answer, right?
Yeah, so good question. And at this point, we haven't heard that the process will be any different than it really has been in the past, right? In terms of how we typically go through this program, right? So every year, regardless of whatever legislation might be out there and new, every year we submit letters of intent to seek clean water fund loans, to help fund some of our projects, right? And that process happens annually, and I think we're getting ready to do it for the 2023 version of projects right now. We did it for 2022 last year. So I'll be actually quite curious to see what comes up in this call in a couple of weeks. To see for the funding that was made available for 2022 in the water sector, right? $48 million in Wisconsin. I'll be curious to find out will that go to projects where letters of intent were filed last year? Because clearly if it's 2022 money, you need to put it to work in 2022. So it may well be that, as far as 2022 dollars go, there's no request we can make currently that's going to have any implication on that. It may be a request that we made last year when we didn't even know there would be $48 million available. So I think there's still a fair bit of uncertainty there. And that's really what we're looking to find out is, we're getting together with the other agencies in the state with the funding authority being the DNR to get some of those answers, right? Is there anything we need to be doing now that we're not doing presently? Do we need to do anything differently than we've done in the past? Those sorts of things. Is there any different information that they want to see submitted from us that we, perhaps wouldn't have sent to them in the past? Lots of questions that I think all of the utilities will have of the DNR, and hopefully we'll get some answers and then can react accordingly.
Yeah, and so you mentioned $48 million for 22. Do you anticipate there's going to be additional rounds of funding as well, or?
It's hard to say. I would imagine so. And clearly the 48 million could probably change over the course of the year. I'm not particularly privy to the nuanced details of how the funding is rolling, all the way through down to the states. But we can only go off of what we're seeing and what we're hearing at present. And that's what we're seeing and what we're hearing at present. So, we know what we did and we know what we asked for a year ago. And what we learn here in the next couple of weeks may well impact what we submit in terms of a letter of intent for the coming year. In terms of the number of projects and what types of projects might qualify, because we have, I don't know, at any given point in time we have a couple of hundred projects active in our capital program, and it's a minority of projects that we request clean water fund loans to help support, but that's dependent on the requirements of the program, right? So we will certainly be looking for any changes to those requirements to help inform our decision in terms of what projects to submit as far as a letter of intent goes.
Okay. So that's, it sounds like a fairly straightforward process in Wisconsin. Jeff, I wonder if you have any understanding of other states. I don't know if it's in Ohio or other cities or local agencies that you guys have worked with and gotten visibility to how their state might work, or if it's going to be different from how Wisconsin is. Jeff, are you having the same problem I am with audio? Okay, so we're not catching any words. We catch an occasional blurb of something, but I don't know if you want to try to reconnect. Just log out, log back in. If that'll take you just a minute, maybe to do that, and see if that will clear you up. There's been it's been a little bit unclear previously, but right now we're not getting anything. So I think we got to try something. All right, there we go. So. Rick, what else do people need to be thinking about? So they've built a capital plan. They've looked at the details and kind of the nuances around what it's going to take to get things funded, Buy American, and all that. This is an interesting thought. One of the things you talked about previously was using the resource management capabilities of eBuilder to really look forward, right? So resources are key now in this industry, and getting people to do the actual work is one of the hardest things that anybody's dealing with nationwide. What are you guys doing? How are you looking at that? How are you measuring that? What's your plans around getting visibility, not just necessarily the resources, but looking forward to the whole plan?
Yeah. So, I mean, during a lot of people have had, varying discussions on these topics, right? And I think the thing we've heard most often is, with all this funding that's coming through from the Infrastructure Act, not going to be enough contractors. There's not going to be enough contractor labor out there to support these projects. And one of the things that we've kind of looked at is, well, if we get a influx of funding, right, to help us move projects forward, yes, we have to worry about contractor availability and contractor labor, but we also have to look at our own labor, right? We're not, we hire consultants to design our projects and contractors to build them, but we manage all of them, right? And a $5 million project doesn't have a significantly different administrative effort than does a $50 million project. So one of the key things that we're looking at is, all right, if we are afforded the opportunity to pull projects forward in our plan, for example, if we receive some funding, do we have the internal capacity to deliver that project and get it out for bid and construction? Do we have the ability to manage a consultant during the design phase of that project? So, from our perspective, it's not just the resources to build the project physically or design the project physically. It's do we have the resources to manage those projects? And that's that's one of the tools, one of the functionalities we use within the system. We can look and say, hey, we have a finite number of project managers. Our historical metrics would tell us how much they can work on, how much value in project they can typically deliver. And if we're going to be significantly more than that, we're going to have to do something with our current resources differently than we do now, or we're going to have more resources. And we'll have data to prove it.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Jeff, let's do a test.
How's this? Better?
All right. Better. We hear you. That's great. So back to that question earlier, any other states that you've been exposed to besides Wisconsin, of course, we've seen these processes play out?
Not start to finish, certainly at this point. There's still a lot of unknowns. We're getting much more involved in California at present, so we're rapidly learning how that state's process goes. But it really is kind of on it. And, we're going where the need is and where the interest is amongst our clients. Yeah, definitely something that we're ramping up on and looking forward to sharing more information on as we learn more.
Okay, very good. And as far as what you guys are doing, there's any particular types of organizations, whether it's cities or counties or water or wastewater districts, where you see the most impact? Where Rick's talking about $48 million for the state of Wisconsin for fresh water. Are there other areas that there's funding coming to a particular vertical or space or area where you guys see as particularly interesting or promising that you guys are looking to pursue?
Well, really across any system that is owned, maintained, serviced by county public works, county engineers, municipal public works and public utilities, and then certainly the regional. So this would, the funding can be applied, across transportation infrastructure, electric, gas, water, sewer. So there's so many options out there. It really helps to, find partners in the space that can help you navigate, the options that exist.
Okay. And your particular focus and what you work on, is it any one of those particular spaces? It's more the municipal or?
Yeah, generally, it's municipal or regional utilities is where my personal focus lies.
Okay, very good. And so, Rick, as you guys have built this plan out, you're using all the tools and technology and reporting that you've done to see that. Do you see any gaps? Do you see any, either technology issues or concerns or problems? Is there anything keeping you up at night as you're getting ready for this that you're worried about or concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, right? In one of the earlier sessions was pretty heavily focused on digital transformation in BIM, right? And clearly our industry is headed that direction, the water and wastewater sector. And we are, I won't say we're behind the 8 ball in that realm, but we are fairly infantile in that realm. We certainly, we see the value in BIM. It can be a challenge to prove an ROI from that perspective, but clearly it's an industry trend. It's one of the 4 global water megatrends. And we have a lot of work to do in that regard. Our designers are leveraging BIM to make their lives easier in design. And I think we're starting to see our contractor community also start to be able to leverage the technology to make their lives easier. And, while it's not keeping me up at night, it's something that we clearly need to advance further in our organization, such that we can leverage those tools and make our projects even that much more efficient, right? There's clear efficiencies to be gained there, and we want to make sure that we have vendors that are creating building information models from a design perspective, and we're getting to the point where we're starting to establish standards such that we can accept those deliverables and make them available to others over the life cycle of the project. So that's an area we're definitely working on and looking to move forward in the coming years, because we certainly see the advantages in having it.
Okay, that's good, and certainly I, as a software vendor, would love to speak to the ROI of utilizing more software. But maybe we'll ask Jeff that question. Jeff, have you seen some of your clients adopt BIM in the space? Have they used that? Have they achieved an ROI with it?
I have not. It's an interesting. We've seen that. BIM is been around for some time now, right? And the divisions within municipal organization or regional government or local government organization seen migrate to leveraging that technology first. It's really been airports and some facilities. Generally across the city enterprise, you don't see it in facilities, but airports have been moving in that direction for some time. In the water wastewater space, you haven't seen a whole lot of trend that way. And I think to get to the the initial question I think you asked Rick, which was what kind of keeps him up at night. There has been a little bit of a theme that I've seen develop across the organizations that I work with, and what is keeping our clients up is capacity. There's so much to be done, and there's a lot of opportunity to do those things right now. But it's incredibly difficult to find the internal capacity to carry out all of those initiatives that you want to take on. So that's where I think there can definitely be some advantages around being strategic about partnering, with the private sector, partnering with other public sector entities, but looking at ways that you can boost your own internal capacity to tackle some of these really important initiatives.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, right? It's something in our business, in eBuilder particularly, that we see. And when we see an organization, it's one thing to have a steady $50 million, $100 million annual capital program, and you're running along and you get staff for that and everything's fine. It's when you get this influx of new dollars coming in, and it's going to be new projects and there's going to be new work. How do you handle that volume? Right. And so that's oftentimes, I guess, where firms like Woolpert comes in, where there's going to be a spike in the amount of effort that's required, a spike in the leadership and management that's going to be required, but it's only going to be for a short time. It's going to be for a period of years, 3 or 5 or 7 or whatever that number is. So do you staff up for that? Do you hire people for that? Or do you go to an outside firm and bring an outside firm in to staff augment, right? And so that's certainly one of those challenges that people can look to firms like yours to help them resolve. So just a few minutes here left. I'll just say one more time to our audience here that if they have a question, now's the time to submit it. And if there aren't any questions, as there's not, Rick, I'll give you a few minutes to take on any other closing comments you might like to address.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks, Matt. Back to what you just said, right? That spike in spending. We've had a couple of those in our past when we did our deep tunnel program, and clearly, if you're looking at a temporary spike in projects that you are funded to be able to deliver, hiring internally certainly is not the only solution, and may in fact not be a very good solution if it's going to be a short-term spike. And we've had programs in the past where during some of those spikes, we reach out to our local consulting community to say, all right, we're going to need some, long-term but still temporary help with, construction management and administration, design delivery, so on and so forth. So, yeah, there are solutions out there that don't require internal staff to deal with. Certainly there's advantages and disadvantages to all of them. And then I guess one other thing I would say relative to, whether it's a project management information system, BIM, asset management system, whatever the case may be, everything we've talked about today really focuses on getting more people access to data more efficiently. And I think, regardless of what side of the spectrum you're coming at this from, all of the systems that we've been talking about today really allow us to make more informed, better decisions more effectively and more quickly. Because again, we have access to data that we previously didn't have access to without incredible challenge.
Right on. And Jeff, any closing comments from you as well?
Yeah, really just to emphasize, to be looking at these things comprehensively. Anytime you're looking at a large influx of funding, big opportunities to be transformational, for your organization, I think it's important that you do consider, as many possible touch points into that program as possible. So, if you're looking at making a big capital investment, look at how you can improve your data along the way. Rick mentioned a couple of things, that are worth throwing out and maybe pointing out a little bit further. One of them is, take advantage of your specifications of what you're asking contractors to produce. If they're producing data for you, make sure that you're getting it in a format that's going to be useful. Make sure that they're giving it to you digitally. Leverage what other people are doing as much as you possibly can as you work through developing your programs that you want to take on with IIJA or ARPA or any other funding source for that matter.
So, Rick and Jeff, first I'll say thank you for being here today. And second, I'll say there is a question that's been submitted. I don't know if you see the Q&A, but this sounds kind of familiar, Rick, to something you guys deal with. These guys operate a 110-year-old water filtration plant. And they have a customer base of 50,000 and located in a disadvantaged area. And they're going to need significant grants to make the $50 million project a reality. Are there opportunities to help fund this project through IIJA?
I would certainly think there are. And I know we started out today talking about that guidebook. You can go to the water sector of that guidebook, and it's somewhat interactive with links, right? You can find out for Maryland or for Pennsylvania or wherever you are, what sorts of funding has been made available to the water sector, and then what program or programs that funding is going through. So I would definitely head that direction first. See what programs might be funding projects in that realm, and then in a perfect world, you'll have a contact from that program you can reach out to, and in a perhaps a slightly more imperfect world and perhaps more reality, you may have to find a contact or talk to the head of the organization that may have a contact. But I would certainly think this is a prime example of something that the program is looking to fund.
Yeah. And Jeff, I know you guys, Woolpert has a lot of people based in Maryland, so maybe these folks could reach out to your team there in Maryland and get some other advice, right?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you, Robert. Definitely would advise as well, the guidebook is a great first stop. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you're talking with your local representatives of these federal organizations like the EPA, who are going to be able to offer some insight as to how these sources are going to work. But yeah, we absolutely, we've got a large presence in the region.
Very good. Well, listen, thanks again, Rick, Jeff. You guys' input today was really valuable and appreciated. We appreciate your partnership, your business, and appreciate your contributions today. So thanks a lot. And we will we'll drop here and hopefully see everybody on the next session.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Take care. Bye.